Since then, we implemented a system where we inform players if a current patch has changes that might not work well with ongoing runs. All of this we added in the last month of work.
Do you consider yourselves fans of our game?
I was under the pirate flag for a long time. I thought it was an ordinary, unremarkable clone.
Knock knock, travelers! This is a new episode of the Knock on the Coffin Lid developer video diaries. Well, it finally happened. On August 8th, our game Knock on the Coffin Lid was released. Hooray! To say that we are thrilled and happy is an understatement. And of course, we will talk a lot about this today. But first, let me introduce everyone present here with us today. Of course, there is Andre, aka Inri, the founder of Red Boon Studio, our special guests, veterans of Knock on the Coffin Lid and our Discord server, Altair, also known as Zastupnik, and Call Me Shadow, and of course, me, Nastya, also known as Marfonia, the community manager of Knock on the Coffin Lid.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
So we'll get acquainted with the game and talk about everything a bit later. First, let's start with the news. Friends, as we already mentioned, the big day has arrived. The release day of Knock on the Coffin Lid. Let's summarize and tell you more about what has been added to the game with the release. You are in for a grand finale, and we are not only talking about the epic confrontation between Vanatus and Melinis, but also the end of Vanatus' story and the main story in general. But don't forget that we will have the DLC Nightmares of Melinis, where we will conclude Mortis' story in the world of Midian.
In addition, just before the release, we added tracking for the main quests because we received many reports from you about not being able to find what to do next. Simply put, Mortis' hints like, go somewhere and find something, didn't work very well, as you understood. So we added additional indicators showing where you need to go. Now, when you enter any of the biome maps, you will see small crowns over important events, even those you haven't discovered yet. Let this be a hint about where to look for the solution to defeating Melinis. Those who have already tried our Knock on the Coffin Lid, prologue, have probably seen the new challenges mode, in this case for Percival. Now it is fully in the game for all three characters. This is a separate mode that is more roguelike. If our game is somewhat roguelike, but more about the story, world exploration, and plot development, we have added an additional mode where you can now challenge yourself, gain additional buffs, and advantages for the hero to strengthen your class, which will help you then play in story mode at the Nightmare difficulty level. There are many new modifications, new solutions, and at the end, you get an upgraded character with their main perk. Throughout, you will also strengthen your character in various ways. This challenge is more for those who want to try themselves in roguelike mode. I hope you will like it. We look forward to your feedback. Write to us your thoughts. It's important to think about how to improve and develop it further. New plot resolutions, new sounds, new animations. All of this we added in the last month of work. And you might have seen some of them in the prologue, but they were not in the main game. Now we have fully voiced events. Everything is animated as much as we could. If you find something not animated, please report it as a bug in the game or in the Discord server. It's important for us because there's a lot, and our team is small, so we could have missed something. But it seems everything is added. Enjoy! On the release, we added everything that was missing, everything you couldn't see in the beta or early access. Now everything is fully voiced and animated. All the buttons you press have corresponding sounds. If anyone notices, even in the Heroes book, if you choose an item to look at, you also get a voiceover corresponding to that choice. The Lunar Druid class, I think, is the most vivid example. There are plot elements that were added only now, so we look forward to your feedback if you notice any plot inconsistencies or something not animated or voiced. Please report it to us. It's important because we might not find or notice it since there are many quests and branches, and it takes a lot of time to get to them. And it might work well in tests, but not in the final game, so we await your feedback. We've already mentioned that every decision you make has consequences. And we received criticism that, in fact, at the end, there are no consequences. We have 3 endings that depend on your overall actions, and few actions have significant consequences. But now you will see every outcome. So we decided to combine the credits with the final stories, where all your actions throughout the last run will be revealed. Don't worry, of course. You cannot make decisions in all possible events in different biomes in one run, because it's simply impossible. In the next patches, we will try to add the option to ask Mortis to do something for you if you suddenly were not in that place. Then you can end it so that the world will be as you want, based on your run's results. But undoubtedly, some results require multiple event developments to find some solutions in rather complex events chains. So, I hope you find everything we have hidden from you and all our plots that we wanted to convey to you will still be noticed by the players. I would like to say that we have added cross-platform saves. For now, this works between our games, the prologue, and the main game. But this is a groundwork, so that when we release the game on other platforms or in the mobile version, it will be possible to transfer your saves. For now, this works within Steam, but if you have a save file from another version of the game on your computer, you will retain your progress. So don't be afraid to play the prologue and then continue the game in the full version without losing any of your achievements or progress. But before we get to the questions, I would like to ask our guests how they like the game. They have been with us since 2021, for more than 3 years. And how do you like the game? How do you like the release? Did it meet your expectations? Please share your impressions.
Thank you very much for giving the floor. It's a big celebration both for you and for us. I can say that I am very pleased with the game as it is now. I couldn't imagine when I bought it in early access that it would develop and fill with more content each day. Initially, when the game was first released in early access, I thought it was an ordinary, unremarkable clone presented by common analogy. But I can now confidently say that the game includes a lot of different content, a lot of filling, and a story built around the Groundhog Day time loop is developing very interestingly. Following the plot, the heroes, their motivations and actions is very captivating. And the fact that the card roguelike mode has been expanded and deepened, bringing in new elements, I consider a very good direction and a very good idea. So, in any case, I congratulate you on the release. It's a big celebration both for us and for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Calm as Shadow. Altair, what do you think?
Well, since I have been following the game since its early access release, I can say that I was not disappointed in waiting for the release because the story that was written pleased me very much in how it ended. And I really liked the changes that were made. Although I didn't agree with some, most of them hit the nail on the head.
Which ones, for example?
For instance, the change to the Madman, the introduction of new class items, subclasses, when we considered something impossible, the karma system, the free run mode, with challenges that gave very good perks for the story mode, thus making you play both the story to enjoy the plot and the free run, which for many became not just an optional feature, but a really good motivation to replay the game with different classes.
So guys, thank you very much for the feedback. We are really glad that you have been with us for so long and went through this difficult path with us. Actually, I feel that if we started making this game today from scratch, it would take us about a year and a half instead of these 5 years. In fact, 3 years if we don't count the pauses we had. But anyway, everyone learns and gains experience, and there are things we redid many times if you remember. For example, Venatus, which we first made in one version, played a lot, adjusted, and then completely changed it drastically. This also took a lot of time and brought many related bug fixes, as you remember. Well, let's move on.
And now let's start with the questions for developers. Are you satisfied with the fact that you released your game into early access? If you could go back and had the resources to develop the game further, would you have gone into early access or released the full version after polishing it?
I think we would have done it a bit differently than we did now. Early access gave us a lot. For example, the people who helped us and shared their gaming experience. And we received feedback. I think for any studio making their first game, doing it in secret and then releasing it is very risky because where else can you refine the game? With your friends maybe, or if you have a community that helps you. And if it's not a pure story mode where you build your gameplay entirely on the story, like in some games, where all gameplay is built just on the plot, then I think a game like ours, which is relatively large in terms of its mechanics and all the content, absolutely needed early access. The only thing I would have done differently for early access is to use the new tool on Steam, where the demo becomes part of the game, and you can release the demo as a free-to-play game. If I could turn back time, I would have made a demo instead of a full game because you have to pay for the full game to test it, so to speak. But if we could have made a demo, more players would have tried it, and more players would have given us feedback. This would have given us more benefits if, at the time of a release, we had the money, resources, and so on to continue developing the game. So if I were to answer this question directly, yes, undoubtedly, we would have done it differently. We would have used the demo system and continued development with the demo.
Let's move on to the next question. When did you start accumulating development fragments for future marketing purposes?
I'm not entirely sure what is meant by this question, but I'll answer it as I understand. If it's about when our development fragments began to appear in marketing materials, such as in developer diaries, then it started right away. Initially, we didn't have a special person to photograph, film, or gather these materials, so it was just patch notes in some of our sketches. However, in terms of writing and maintaining a developer diary and other such activities, we began doing this about 2 years ago. That's when we started writing and publishing our work and thoughts. We often share this information not so much for marketing purposes, but to get feedback from users. So while some things might be seen as marketing, like promoting some new feature, we primarily talk about it to see if anyone is interested in it. So we've been gathering and posting materials for about 2 years.
We have accumulated a lot of material. There's more than enough to post. And now with the upcoming DLC, even more material is coming. Oh, can't wait to share it. At what stage of the game did you develop a strategy, and how long did it take you to plan it?
Actually, we never really had one. We just did what we thought was necessary. The team was constantly changing, and we had many events within the team. Those who follow us know this. To say that more or less proper and efficient development started probably at the beginning of this year or the end of the last year. Around this time, we began to make strategically sound decisions, separating tasks into different parts or working on them separately and so on. But the game is very large with a lot of old code, so we had to redo many things. Many of our innovations would break the old ones, which caused delays. So we'll likely have a strategy for the next project. And we already have a very clear understanding of how we'll approach the next project to ensure maximum efficiency in terms of labor and the effectiveness of each team member.
Did you come up with everything yourselves, or did you consult specialists outside the development team?
Well, here we have two specialists with us. We did consult them and generally tried to maintain an open development approach. If someone suggested something, we read the feedback. In our diaries, we often wrote when we had questions for the audience or if we had any doubts. Often we would just create something, release it, and see how the players responded. If something was off, we would change it. This is similar to the first versions of the runs. If the guys remember, we didn't have elevations, but scales on which you chose the difficulty level to proceed with. If we're talking about art, materials, and content, it all depended on whether the team had funds at the time. When we needed to create a certain amount of material and could afford to pay for it, everything was great, and our freelance artist essentially became a full-time employee because he spent all his time drawing for us. When we didn't have the funds, this same person could still create for us, but with breaks since he was working on other projects. I think nowadays it's impossible to develop a game without involving external specialists, even temporarily. For example, our current sound designer, Sergey, initially created sounds for us as a freelancer. He just did the sound effects for certain parts. Later, we worked well together, and when we had the funds, he started working more with us and created many sounds. He might not have done everything himself. He organized some parts by involving others externally for specific tasks. So we had specialists both in-house and from outside, depending on the team's financial capabilities.
Is there a chance that after the game is released, there will be a complete progress reset or save wipe again after some time?
Well, let's put it this way. There's only been one wipe, and that was about 2 years ago. Since then, we implemented a system where we inform players if a current patch has changes that might not work well with ongoing runs. But if you reset your run instead of the entire save file, all your progress remains and nothing changes. So you can just start a new run and everything will be fine. However, I highly recommend everyone who played a long time ago to delete all their saves, create a new one, and play the game again because it has changed significantly. Even if you have an old save with significant progress, you will miss out on a lot if you start a new run without resetting progress, because some triggers have already activated, and you won't see certain content, no matter how hard you try. This content includes interesting new events, items, rewards, and more. I strongly recommend trying the game from scratch after release.
In the developer diaries, there were glimpses of enemies and events that are currently, before the game's release, as we collected questions in advance, not in the game. For example, the elven girl in the swamps. Will all of this be in the release?
I remember this question from you, Altair, when we were collecting questions. You found examples of interesting villains not currently in the game. The thing is, when we published developer diaries, we also published things that were included in the DLC, since the DLC and the main game are closely linked. When we created some content, we did it for the DLC right away. So some things are already present at release, and you can play and see them. However, some are only in the DLC. For example, the event with the elven girl, Isha, will be fully in the DLC and can only be seen there.
Next question. Will your policy towards development and player involvement change in case of success?
I am in favor of involving players more in the development process. Of course, there are sometimes conflicting ideas when someone comes to us with their own style and desires that don't align with ours at all. I believe the modern development approach is to take a lot of great ideas from players and act as a filter to choose what can be integrated. It's like saying, let's add shooting elements to a card roguelike and throw cards at targets. And if you hit the target, the card plays. It might sound crazy, but we could even try it out and see if it's a good idea or not. What seems like a crazy idea might turn out to be brilliant. Those who have already played through the game might be surprised by some things they see at the end. So, on the contrary, we will remain open to incorporating player feedback into what we do and always listen closely. Undoubtedly, as we consider ourselves specialists now, we can understand what will work and what won't. At the beginning of development, we were just players who wanted to try out ideas and thought some things would be cool. And now, we see the consequences. For instance, we ended up with lots buffs, many of which we thankfully removed from the game because it was too overloaded. Remember the first interface where you had 6 columns with things like evasion, strength, agility, and many other attributes that didn't even fit on the screen? We've now streamlined it. If you notice, all these parameters now fit much better, with rarely more than 2 columns of buffs. In most parts of the game, you won't have more than 6, 8 parameters on you. Some were hidden, some removed. It was a mistake to introduce so many different effects for each character, especially when they carried over to each other, mixing agility, spirit, and other connections, making it hard to comprehend. We were also those players who wanted more and cooler things. Now, as game designers, we understand that more and cooler can overwhelm players. You need to deliver it properly, either in portions or using other tools. Therefore, we welcome player feedback and participation in our future games. We will strive to respond constructively, explain why something can or cannot be done, and show the results of our efforts.
Do you plan to release DLC? Yes, that's true. Will it come out soon, or should we expect it next year?
The release of DLC entirely depends on the success of the current game. If we have good sales, we'll be able to continue making DLC with the same team, and it could come out by December, for example. If there are any issues, the DLC will be released next year in the first half.
Oh, another pressing question. I'll ask this on behalf of the entire community. Many are eagerly awaiting Russian voice acting. Do you plan to add this soon?
The issue with voice acting is always cost-related. Good voice acting costs twice as much. We only had funds for one voice acting, and we chose English because it's an international language. You can judge the quality of the character and trailer voice acting yourself. They're done by very good actors, and we're pleased to have worked with them. If we have the funds for Russian voice acting, they will definitely be added, along with other languages, including Chinese. But as of now, there are no plans, because we explored options that offered cheap solutions, but resulted in low quality, which didn't satisfy us. Therefore, we decided it's better to earn money first and then add them.
And let's ask one final question directly to the developers. Will we be on VK Play?
Absolutely, as soon as possible.
Yes, and another question, quite popular by the way. Will there be any porting, especially to mobile devices?
Our game plays wonderfully on mobile devices. We tested it on a Windows Nexus tablet, that's what it was called, which is basically a laptop in tablet form with a touchscreen. I remember catching myself spending 3 hours lying on the couch playing cards. I should have gotten up and done something else, but it was so engaging and cool. So I think the game is perfect for mobile or tablet play, and that's definitely in our plans.
All right, so the questions from our community have come to an end. Before we move on to the questions for our guests, we want to ask if you have any questions for us.
Yes, definitely. Andre, I'd like to know if there will be support for Steam Deck and if it's already available. The second question is whether Steam Workshop will be supported. Are you planning to integrate this feature into the game? Or is this something planned for later, after the DLC release?
Да, безусловно, про Steam Deck я сам игрок Steam Deck, поэтому...
Yes, absolutely. I'm a Steam Deck player myself, so I find it a bit inconvenient to play our game on the Steam Deck. When we were at an exhibition, I saw a guy playing using the side touchscreens, and it was cool. He played very efficiently, and I thought, oh, that's possible. But since our game was not initially designed for Steam Deck, because it wasn't around then, and we didn't consider gamepad support, we have an older version of Unity. We didn't use the built-in tool for gamepad integration, so we can't currently support Steam Deck because we lack gamepad integration. We really wanted to implement gamepad integration by the release, but we postponed it because it's quite challenging. The interface isn't designed for gamepad control, so using it like a mouse isn't very convenient. We have found a solution, but it's very labor-intensive. It would take about a month and a half, maybe around a month, to rework a lot of things to integrate the gamepad properly. So, yes, we very much want to integrate with Steam Deck, but it will come later. Maybe even before the DLC, because the DLC is mostly ready programmatically, with only some game design work and a bit of art left. If the programmers manage to fix all the bugs, they'll have time to work on various integrations, porting to PlayStation and other devices. So I hope we can make a Steam Deck version before the DLC is released. Regarding the Steam Workshop and the workshop, we didn't initially plan for this because it requires special development to use it. If successful, I think we'll simply release it additionally. Our next games will definitely be made with an editor right away, with the possibility for other users to do whatever they want with it, because it just adds the opportunity for them to implement what they want. But in this case, we haven't laid the groundwork for it, and it's a very costly amount of work, so we haven't implemented it yet. But we'd really like to, undoubtedly.
Since you want to create more games in the same universe if Knock on the Coffin Lid, our beloved coffin, is successful, will it somehow appear in future games, perhaps as Easter eggs, game characters, or notes?
In fact, we've had many ideas about this topic, about Easter eggs and integration. Especially those who complete the DLC and get to know Mortis better will understand that we'll see Mortis many more times in different places, depending on whether we continue making games or not. So undoubtedly, you can already find Easter eggs in the game. I think, as experienced players, you already remember that unnamed item in the very interesting porcelain, no, what's it called? Not porcelain, but...
Faience.
Right, the faience item that Batu has somewhere nearby. We added this so that players would question how it ended up there. And these things are clearly not from this universe, so to speak. And these are references to our future projects that we have planned. But I won't spoil it. That's closer to the next projects. But the answer is categorically yes. Absolutely, there are many references, many characters, possibly even from the current game, who will appear in our future games.
And another question. If successful, do you plan to release merchandise?
As for merchandise, I haven't thought about it at all, but it depends on success, yes. But all the materials are on our website. You can take any picture and print it on a t-shirt, and there's your merch. I don't know. I've never done this before. I think this is done by separate companies that offer to create merch for companies with some reach or audience. So it's quite possible, why not?
Now let's move on to questions for our guests. To be honest, we consider you our fans. So we'd like to ask you the following. Do you consider yourselves fans of our game? And how do you feel about your involvement in our lives, in development, and in our community in general?
Answering the first part of the question, yes, I do consider myself more of a fan of yours, simply because I've been in the community for about 3 years, as mentioned, and I've almost never burned out from this game or strayed far from it. Regarding how I feel about being in your community, it's mostly extremely positive because it's nice to see that the developers are engaging with us as a community. For example, the idea of the blacksmith, who was initially suggested by a community member to be at Rattling Mountain, became a truly important character. And it's also pleasant to see our suggestions being implemented. Most importantly, the bugs we report are actually getting fixed. For instance, issues with the talking puddle, the wolf, or Percival the giant, which have already become memes.
Calm as Shadow, do you have anything to add?
I consider myself a fan, particularly of this project. I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to participate in this project and contribute to it. It flatters me that the developer is open to dialogue and willing to listen. Because initially, before buying the game, I was under the pirate flag for a long time. I found a good game, came to test it, and see what it was all about. I encountered a bug, reached out on Discord, and despite having a pirated version of the game, they helped me. So I can mostly consider myself a fan, because the game offers a wonderful experience. Everyone can find something for themselves in it. If someone wants to relax in the evening and throw some cards around, the game provides that opportunity. If they want to follow an interesting storyline, that's available too. If you're a fan of card-based roguelike games and enjoy building decks and finding intricate ways to play, the game offers that as well. So yes, I definitely consider myself a fan because the game meets all the needs that players are looking for.
Altair, Calm as Shadow, please tell us, is this your first experience participating in game development, so to speak? Or have you been involved in other projects before, Knock on the Coffin Lid, or perhaps simultaneously?
To be honest, no. For me, it was the opposite. Thanks to Knock on the Coffin Lid, I started participating in another game as a pixel art spriter. So you could say that thanks to your game, I became involved in another community where I also contribute. For that, thank you very much.
That's really cool. I've seen your icons for the guide. I thought that if we ever make a pixel art game, I'll definitely reach out to you to draw something for us, if you have the time. But it was fun. It was great.
It just happened that I got involved in a game where pixel art skills were needed, and I wanted to learn how to draw. That's how it worked out.
Well, this is the first game where I'm participating. In most cases, I've always been involved in writing various reviews for different games. But as a tester, someone who checks and catches bugs, this is my first game in an active role. And I can say that I'm definitely grateful to you for this opportunity, for the chance to see things from the player's perspective and how everything looks from the inside. For a player, it's just animations moving, jumping, sounds and actions, all just as they should be. But when you're testing, participating, you see how everything is designed, graded and adjusted, and you realize how deep it all goes. I'm personally grateful for the opportunity to see the behind the scenes of production. It's a very interesting experience. I'm thankful for the chance I've been given.
You now look at the games you play from a slightly different perspective, thinking something like, oh, they did this really well. Oh, this was probably difficult. Oh, they cut corners here. Such weak animation, shame on them.
When you started adding animations, like when Percival swings his sword and his arm moves up or various effects, it all starts to look really cool and greatly enhances immersion and the overall feel. I'm saying, I never thought about it before, how block effects occur, and it all seemed like a given. But when you see the behind-the-scenes process, how it's all programmed, how it looks on real art and concepts, and how it all gets implemented, it's fascinating. For instance, take the events. Previously, events were static images, but gradually you started to develop this aspect, and now even the events have animations. I mean, figures move, effects appear, fire, water moves. Especially when you switch to spine, it transformed the game so well, making it come alive. You don't just have static characters standing there. Even the enemies move, they scratch themselves. They perform various actions during the battle. This, in essence, gives a sense of liveliness. In the early stages, when Percival fights in the first match, you can see a Viking ship passing by on the water, moving from left to right. All these little details and moments greatly enhance immersion, and it's definitely very cool. The visual effects like blocking, invulnerability, dodging started to be represented well. The game shows and tells what's happening.
Ну, главное, что теперь есть понимание того, что происходит, потому что если вспомнить старые наши билды,
The main thing is that now there's an understanding of what's happening. Because if you remember our old builds, during a fight, something would happen. You'd lose to something, and you wouldn't understand what it was. Something came from somewhere, and then you'd realize, oh right, I didn't pay attention to that buff, that's it. Especially when you record the screen and watch it later. We wanted to add a log, but didn't know where to place it, so there is actually a log. You just need to know the key where it's hidden. It's more of a system thing. Anyway, great, thank you. I think we should ask you at the end what you would recommend to us. I mean, regarding our communication with you as players, is there anything we could improve or refine, or do you think everything is already good and we're doing everything right? Maybe some advice for us.
Honestly speaking, I don't have any suggestions for improving communication with the community because, in my opinion, you already make concessions where necessary, while also being able to stand by your point of view if you see that suggestions don't fit, no matter how much the community pressures you. You've already taken a great position, where deviating either way could turn good communication into either a tool of pressure on you or on the community. So, in my opinion, there's nothing to change.
Well, I think we're out of questions for today. It was nice meeting with you. The last time we had a call must have been about 2 years ago, if not more. I remember we had a few small get-togethers a couple of times in the evening. I hope our release will be successful. We'll wait for the results of the first few days, and if all goes well, I hope we can have many more cozy chats in this Discord and keep in touch. Thank you again. See you in the game. We look forward to your feedback and presence in the community. Send in your reports, and as always, stay with us. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And to our viewers, don't forget to subscribe to our social media and follow the news, because there's much more to come.
Goodbye, everyone.
Yes, goodbye. Until next time.